Past Lives stars Greta Lee, Teo Yo and John Magaro. It is written and directed by Celine Song, and it has been nominated for Best Picture at the 2024 Academy Awards. It follows the story of Nora and Hae Young. These are two childhood friends who grow up, drift apart, and are pulled back together. Now, Nora, kind of emigrates to New York, whereas he stays behind in Korea. 12 years go by when he kind of reaches out to her, he finds her, reaches out to her, and the two strike up the same friendship they once had as children. Only this time there's a deep growing attraction there. Due to certain things that were going on in Nora's life, she decides that they need to take a little bit of a break from communication, because basically she feels herself falling for this guy, but she doesn't want that to be a distraction for the things she needs to get done at this point in her life. As it happens, another 12 years go by and she ends up getting married. She gets married to a man named Arthur, played by Magaro, and that's when Hae Sung kind of gets back in touch and that flame starts to ignite again. And the question is, what's going to happen there? Is she going to stay faithful to her husband, or is she going to go for what seems to be like destiny is telling her to go with this man that, you know, she knew as a child, known since a child, and has always had feelings for, and all that kind of nonsense. Now, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the movie without spoilers, but then I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper as to just why I loved this film so much, and that will contain spoilers. I will let you know just before I go into that. So if you haven't seen the film, then you can leave this review and go and watch it and come back another time. But yeah, without going into spoilers, my thoughts on the film are thus. I really loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was beautifully shot. You know, the cinematography, the locations, different locations to go to. We have Korean locations, we have New York locations. I thought was really beautiful. I thought the performances by the three leads were excellent, deserving of nominations. I don't know if they've been nominated for Oscars in this year's Oscars, but if not, I think they certainly are worthy. I think the relationship dynamics between the different characters are very honest, very authentic, particularly that between Greta Lee's character Nora and her husband Arthur. I think, yeah, their relationship rings true to me. I think there is a bit more of a sentimental leaning towards Nora and her childhood friend. I think the film is constantly kind of asking you to want them to get together, shall we say. Something that a lot of Hollywood movies do, something that's actually called out at one point by the husband character very specifically. I think it's brilliantly directed. I think Celine Song, who directs this, has a very keen eye about relationships and just about body language and mannerisms, how so much can be said within the silences. You know, that two people can just be walking together and you can hear an entire conversation going on without them saying a word. That was done seemingly to great effect in the film Carol, which I didn't like, because that was a film all about feelings, and feelings being essentially truth. Like, act on your feelings because they're not going to steer you wrong. If you feel a particular way, then it must be true. That was essentially my takeaway from Carol. And yeah, I didn't like it. Didn't like where that film goes. This film's got some similar kind of patterns in it that made me kind of clench up. But I think it handles the overall kind of themes of that stuff much better, much more honestly, much more truthfully, I would say, which is why I liked it so much. But yeah, just a really great down-to-earth drama that's not got a lot of flash and bang. but it's really gripping. Once it gets going, like the first 25 minutes, I wasn't sure I was going to be into it. You know, when we're first following these two people as kids, and I'm just like, okay, where are we going with this? It's a bit slow, it's a bit plodding, but then you realise once we get into them being adults, they've done all the groundwork, and everything they say to each other and the way they respond to each other as adults, you get, all right, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because of what we've seen from them as kids, this makes sense. I can buy into this relationship. I believe this relationship. This isn't just two people who've randomly met. And it feeds in a lot, I think, to memory. It made me start thinking back to my childhood and the people I knew and met like back at that age and do have fond memories of. And, you know, there's always like questions of what if that had been different? What if I'd have jumped in there? And I think the film does play on that notion that your life can take so many different turns. But ultimately, I think it also kind of positions us into the reality of dealing with you are where you are. Any notions of past lives or future lives, while quite fanciful, is ultimately it's pointless, because you're not living a past life and you're not living a future life. You're living this life, and that's the life you've got to live. That's my brief thoughts on it. I think you should definitely check it out if you've not seen it. I'm going to go into spoilers now, just to get a little bit deeper into just why I loved this film so much. So here goes. Now, I personally think that this film makes a really great companion piece to a film I've just reviewed, Maestro, which has also been nominated for Best Picture at this awards. I feel wrongly so. I really don't think it's worthy of a Best Picture nomination. This film, however, I do. I think it is beautifully made, beautifully observed. I think the relationships between these people feels genuine, feels authentic to me, particularly that between Nora and her husband Arthur. Some of the conversations they have with each other feels very real, feels very honest. Particularly from the standpoint of this being a genuine loving couple who are able to communicate with each other. I have a very similar relationship with my own wife. I think one of the biggest problems facing relationships today and I guess throughout the whole history of mankind is communication. If you can't communicate with your spouse, then resentments are going to set in, confusion is going to set in. All manner of things are going to set in that are going to cause you to drift apart. The reason I feel like this is a great companion film to Maestro is that they both deal with this notion of not only honesty in marriage, but also commitment of what true love actually is. And that is, it's something that's not based purely on feelings, but rather choices. Both films deal with someone who gets married, who then has desires, shall we say, that would lead them away from that marriage. And in one film, that is Maestro, those desires are taken, basically the feelings are taken as truth, and therefore they lead a man astray from his wife into other relationships because he gives into desires rather than staying true to the choices he made to a woman that he does actually love. Many people will say, oh, but that's about a man who's actually gay and is trapped in a heterosexual marriage. And no, it's not, because he loved that woman. In the truest sense of the word, he loved her. He had a relationship with her that was built on respect, that, you know, he was there for her when, you know, she was ill, and he clearly showed that he loved her. He made choices, and that's ultimately what love is. It's a choice. In this film, in Past Lives, we get something similar, where actually there are certain desires that kind of rear their head, and all of the best excuses that mankind can throw at someone to go through with those desires, to act on those desires, our present. You know, this seems to be a relationship destined to happen. Two childhood friends that fell in love in their early 20s, but then kind of got like lost from each other only to be reunited. But now she's married, and it's like, but she shouldn't be married because this is clearly the guy that was meant for her. No, that's nonsense. It's not the guy that was meant for her at all. If it had been the guy that was meant for her, she'd have chosen him back then. She'd have done everything in her power to get with him back then. And I feel like this film does a really great, authentic job of looking at how choices we make are far more important than the desires we feel. You know, the responsibility to those choices that we've made. I couldn't help but be emotionally affected by this film. It's one that's kind of stuck with me. And now I got into a conversation with it just the other day with one of my subscribers on YouTube. I don't know if he's subscribed. Certainly he comments. Jacob Corinthos. We get into some conversations at times. I think we have slightly different tastes, which is fun. It creates discussion. He wasn't that into this film. He found it overly sentimental, and for me personally, I think that sentimentality is very much deliberate, but it's also very much necessary to the telling of the story, because it's a story about how we allow our feelings to dictate our actions. And another film that this reminded me of is the Adam Sandler film Spanglish, which takes a similar vein, which is that it builds you up, the audience, it builds you up to almost want this man, this central figure, to have an affair. Because you look at his wife, she's a bit nutty, and you're like, blimey, that's a lot to handle, isn't it? And then you look at this woman that he starts to have a bit of a romantic kind of feeling for, and you're like, yeah, clearly she's the one, and it makes you, the audience, feel that, only to at the end say, no, you made your choice, you made a commitment, you took vows, honour them, grow up, grow a pair, and honour the vows you made to your wife. And that's essentially what this film does as well. And I just feel like there's far too few movies and TV shows out there today that express that as a central theme, that acknowledge that truth, and in such a beautiful way too. And I think that's why the sentimentality is built in, because the film is literally giving you all the cues to say, this woman should be with the childhood friend. I mean, look at them, they're great together, you know, and that sentimentality really helps you to lean into those feelings. But those feelings are not honest, they're not truth. What's true is the relationship she has with her husband, and I think that relationship is portrayed really beautifully, really authentically. I got halfway through this film, and when she gets married and then the childhood friend comes back into the picture, I started to clench up. I was like, okay, where are they going here? What's, you know, we get this whole speech about past lives, about how people, again, as I say, are destined to meet, are destined to be with each other. It's fate, whatever you want to call it. If they met in a past life, then they're going to meet again. And it was really building up the notion that, yeah, these two were meant for each other. She's not meant to be with the husband. She's meant to be with this guy. And the whole time I'm just like, oh no, I don't like it. And the sentimentality between her and the childhood friend, again, is pushing you into that. But again, as I say, the surprise is that they don't go there, and all the better for it. All the better for it. Personally, I loved the film. I think it was really beautiful. And I, you know, even though I've spoiled it for anyone who's not seen it, I still highly recommend you go and watch it. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Definitely a worthy Best Picture nominee. Certainly when I look at some of the other films that have been nominated this year. But yeah, check it out. If you have seen Past Lives, I'd like to know what you thought about it. So please leave your comments down below on the film. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.